Hello and good night. Welcome to another bedtime story. This story is meant to help you sleep or to relax your mind. Try and find a comfortable place, such as your bed or a soft chair. If you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes now. Try and let go of the day as we begin our tale. Tonight's story is The Flying Trunk. Once upon a time, there was a young man who had everything and understood nothing. Born into wealth, he grew up surrounded by laughter, praise, and the finest things money could buy. His father, a merchant of legendary success, built fortune upon fortune, and his son, accustomed to a life of ease, never questioned the golden path laid before him. He spent his days among so-called friends, young men who flattered him when the wine was flowing and vanished when the cups ran dry. He fancied himself a man of great wisdom, for he could repeat the clever sayings he had heard from poets and philosophers, always with the air of someone who had thought of them himself. His charm was undeniable, his smile infectious, and his pockets deep enough to make up for any faults of character. But then, as sudden as a storm on a summer day, everything was lost. His father's business collapsed. Debts swarmed like locusts, and the grand house that had been his playground was stripped bare. The friends who had once clapped him on the back and laughed at his jokes became mysteriously busy elsewhere. In the end, all that remained to his name was a single possession, an old trunk gifted to him by a great uncle who had had a peculiar sense of humor. The trunk had been accompanied by a letter, but the young man had never paid it any mind and left it with the old trunk in the attic. "Travel well," the letter said, though it offered no further explanation. At first, he had half a mind to sell the old thing. What use had he for a trunk when he had nothing to put inside it? But when he went to inspect it, he found something most unexpected. The moment he lifted the lid, the trunk quivered, shook, and then, before he could even cry out, swept him up into the air and out the window. The wind rushed past his ears, and below him, the city dwindled into a patchwork of rooftops and streets. He clung to the edges, his heart hammering in his chest. Then a voice, dry and unimpressed, spoke from nowhere. "Hold on tighter, or do you prefer to test how well you bounce?" The young man gasped. "Who is there?" "The trunk, obviously." His mouth opened and closed a few times before he managed. "Trunks don't talk." "And yet, here we are," the trunk replied, its tone laced with amusement. "Now, unless you have a particular destination in mind, I suggest you stop gawking and start thinking." And so, for the first time in his life, the young man had to make a decision that was truly his own. Where in the world would he travel? "Somewhere magical," he whispered. The trunk snorted, shook a little bit, and set off towards the east. The world stretched out below them, vast and unknown, and for the first time, he realized he was entirely, thrillingly, terrifyingly free. The trunk soared across land and sea, its course guided by whims unknown to the young man himself. He had intended to steer it, but the trunk had merely chuckled at the suggestion. "Oh yes, by all means. Tell the flying trunk how to fly. I'm sure that will end well. At last, they descended upon a land unlike any he had ever seen. The streets were paved with colored tiles, and the people walked backwards while speaking in sing-song riddles. No one carried umbrellas, though the sky was bright with floating fish-shaped clouds that occasionally drizzled warm rain onto the unsuspecting below. Instead of doors, houses had thick, velvet curtains, and every fountain overflowed, not with water, but with fragrant tea. The young man landed with a thud in a marketplace, right beside a stall selling hats of many colors. The trunk gave a final, sarcastic shake before settling on the ground. "Welcome to wherever this is," it said dryly. "Try not to embarrass yourself too quickly." Before he could respond, a passing merchant bowed to him in an overly elaborate manner. "Ah, a visitor. Do you require a hat, perhaps? One of many colors?" "Our laws demand that all newcomers wear one before speaking with the princess." The young man blinked. "The princess? Oh yes, she is awaiting a suitor. Only the most remarkable of men may approach her." The merchant gave him a knowing look. "Are you remarkable?" The young man straightened, brushing dust from his sleeves. "Why, certainly. After all, I do have a flying trunk. And besides that, I am a man of great wisdom and adventure." The trunk snorted. "Oh, this will be rich." And so, with a many-colored hat perched on his head, the young man sat back into the trunk and set off towards the palace, eager to meet his destiny. The flying trunk dipped and swirled through the air, its worn wood creaking as if it were relishing the afternoon breeze. "And how shall you introduce yourself to this princess? After all, you are a young man of little wealth and no discernible talent." The young man, now thoroughly accustomed to the trunk's snarky commentary, had become something of a connoisseur of its dry wit, and took no notice of its insults. "I shall introduce myself as an angel. I may not have wings, but I have a flying trunk. That's almost as good." The trunk snorted, but found himself intrigued as to his passenger's antics. The young man rehearsed what he was going to say to the princess. "I am an angel, and hearing of your great beauty, I have come to woo you." Or, how about this? "I am an angel from a higher realm. I have come to put my heart and my trunk at your disposal." As he practiced his story to tell the princess, he felt quite proud of himself. Today, in this land unlike any he had known, a place with strange customs and even stranger people, his destiny awaited him, a tower and a princess to woo. Evening was beginning to fall as they neared the tower. The young man peered down at the land below. The houses were built from thick stone and twisted vines, and the trees seemed to lean in on themselves, as though whispering secrets to each other. A winding river flowed through the valley, its water shimmering in the moonlight. "Well, this is it," he said, staring at the tower in the distance. "It looks a bit quaint, don't you think? I hope the princess has a good sense of humor." The trunk snorted. "The only thing she'll find funny is how quickly you get yourself tangled in your own words. Remember, you're not an angel, no matter how many times you say it." "I'll have her convinced," the young man declared confidently. "Angels are persuasive." The trunk remained silent, a rare moment of contemplative pause. As he landed gently before the tower, the young man found himself face to face with the princess. She was standing in her garden, enjoying the fragrance of evening blossoming flowers, an elegant figure with eyes that sparkled like twin sapphires, though her gaze was skeptical. "And who may you be?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. "And why have you come here to visit at this late hour?" "I am an angel," the young man said without hesitation, "sent from the heavens to watch over you." She raised an eyebrow. "An angel? You certainly don't look like one." The young man puffed out his chest. "Appearances are deceiving, my lady. My presence here is a divine intervention." The princess eyed him with mild suspicion, taking a long moment to assess him. Then, with a small, almost imperceptible smile, she stepped aside. "Very well, angel. Come in." Inside the tower, the atmosphere was ethereal. Velvet tapestries lined the walls, and the moonlight, filtering through high, arched windows, bathed the room in a silver glow. They settled by the grand fireplace, where the princess spoke more freely. "I don't believe you are truly an angel," she said, her voice softer now, but with a teasing edge. "And yet, I find you amusing. Tell me, what brings an angel and his angelic trunk to this land?" A small guffaw could be heard from the direction of the trunk. The young man chuckled, basking in the attention. "Why, I have come to see you, princess. The heavens have spoken of your beauty and wisdom, and I simply had to meet you. There is no higher calling than this." Her eyes softened, though there was still a glimmer of doubt in them. Perhaps. But let me ask you this, angel. What will you do if you wish to meet my parents? My father is a man of great humor, and my mother, well, she values wisdom above all else." The young man's face lit up with confidence of someone who had just been handed a challenge. "I shall impress them both with my words. A story of great humor and superior wisdom. It shall be done, and I will prove my extraordinary worth." The princess tilted her head, clearly entertained. "Then I shall give you one night to prepare. But mind you, it must be a tale that makes my father laugh, and one that leaves my mother thinking long after you've gone." "I will begin at once," he declared, rising from his seat with determination. As he began to pace the room, the trunk, who had been very quiet, finally spoke, its voice dripping with sarcasm. "Well, isn't this just perfect? The mighty angel about to tell a story that actually requires some thought. Let's see how you manage this one." The young man ignored the trunk's comments and set to work. He sat at a small desk, scribbling away, his quill flying across the page. His mind was spinning with ideas, but none seemed to fit the bill. Every time he thought of something humorous, it felt shallow, and when he tried to add wisdom, it sounded preachy. Okay, he muttered, trying another approach. Maybe something absurd. The story needs to be light, yes. I'll make the humor subtle, something a little offbeat. And then the message, well, it'll be about kindness, but not too obvious. Something that sneaks up on you. The trunk, sighed from the corner as though bored. "You've got one night, angel, not blessed eternity. Make it count." His pen moved faster now, the ink splattering as he wrote feverishly. The hours passed, and the tower grew quiet, save for the scratching of his quill. He was almost done when the princess returned, entering with an air of quiet curiosity. "How are you faring?" she asked. The young man, holding up his parchment and flushed with triumph, stood. "It's finished. A tale of humor and wisdom, as you asked. I believe it shall meet your father's taste and your mother's heart." The princess nodded, her smile returning. "Very well. You shall tell it to my parents tomorrow morning. We will see if your story is worthy of an angel." The young man stood in the grand hall of the palace, shifting his weight from foot to foot as he awaited the arrival of the king and queen. The princess had arranged the meeting for that morning, and he nervously folded and unfolded the parchment in his hand. The trunk, safely hidden on the balcony, muttered a few words of dubious encouragement before settling into silence. At last, the great double doors swung open, and in strode the king and queen. The king was a broad man with a sharp gaze, while the queen, draped in silks, observed him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The young man, however, paid no mind to their scrutiny. He gave an elegant bow, which was slightly ruined when his coat sleeve caught on the hem of a nearby tapestry. He yanked himself free with a flourish, pretending it had all been part of the performance. "So," the king said, settling onto his throne, "you have come to tell us a story." "Indeed, your majesty," the young man declared, with great enthusiasm. "A tale of mystery, adventure, and profound wisdom." The queen raised an eyebrow at this. "Then proceed." Clearing his throat, the young man began. "Once, in a land where spoons could talk and kettles could dance, though they had terrible rhythm, there was a merchant who sold shadows. Not ordinary shadows, mind you, but shadows that could tell secrets. If a person stood in the right light, their shadow would whisper their heart's deepest longing. Naturally, this became very popular at royal courts, where no one ever said what they truly meant." The king leaned forward, slightly. "And what happened next?" "Ah," the young man waved a dramatic hand. "One day, the merchant sold a shadow to a foolish prince who had no secrets. Unless you count an embarrassing habit of singing to himself in the bath. His shadow, embarrassed by this, had decided to run away and live as a poet. But a poet's life is hard when you have no hands to hold a quill, so it drifted about, composing verses that no one could write down, and haunted libraries where it was frequently mistaken for a smudge on the floor." The queen smirked, clearly entertained despite herself. "And what became of this poor original shadow?" "Ah, now that is where this tragic story takes a turn. The shadow wandered until it found a young woman who was blind to the deceptions of the world. She heard its voice, but saw nothing, and she took pity on it. She gave it a place to rest on her doorstep, and, in return, the shadow became her most loyal guardian. It told her only the truths of the world, never the lies, and so she prospered. The prince, meanwhile, deceived by his new shadow, believed he was the greatest ruler alive, right until he was overthrown by a council of impatient townspeople and very patient tax collectors. A silence followed as the young man finished, looking quite pleased with himself. The princess, who had heard the story beforehand, beamed. The king tapped his chin in thought, while the queen let out a small, unexpected laugh. "That," the king finally said, "was the strangest story I have ever heard." "Oh, thank you, Your Majesty," the young man said, mistaking the statement for high praise. "I have many others, one about a goose who outsmarted a court magician, and another one about a pair of socks that ruled an entire island." The queen exchanged a glance with her husband. "I believe we should hear more from this unorthodox angel. He is, to say the least, intriguing." The young man, oblivious to the layers of meaning in the queen's words, grinned proudly. The princess, delighted, took his arm. Meanwhile, out on the balcony, the flying trunk sighed. "Of all the stories he could have told," it muttered to itself, "he chose that one." The king and queen, amused but impressed by the young man's charm and peculiar storytelling, retired to their chambers to discuss his fate. By the end of the morning, their decision was made. That very afternoon, the kingdom rejoiced at the royal proclamation. The young man had been granted permission to marry the princess. Bells rang, banners unfurled, and citizens took to the streets in merriment. Never one to let an opportunity for spectacle pass him by, the young man decided to add to the celebration in a manner only he could devise, by purchasing an absurd amount of fireworks. Standing before towering crates of rockets, sparklers, and cannon-like explosions, with names like the Dragon's Breath and the Comet's Revenge, he clapped his hands in delight. "This will be a sight to behold," he announced. "The night sky will be so full of light that even the stars will have to move aside. All the people will rejoice at my angelic presence at this feast." The trunk, watching from a respectable distance, groaned. "Oh no, no, I know that look. That's the let's do something spectacularly reckless look." "Nonsense," the young man said, already attempting to balance 3 oversized rockets under one arm. "This is a gift to the people. They will remember my wedding as the most dazzling in history. They'll remember it as the day half the town was nearly set on fire," the trunk grumbled. "Tell me, O Grand Master of Chaos, have you ever actually lit a firework before?" The young man paused. "The details are unimportant." Sighing, the trunk resigned itself to its fate. "Just promise me you won't set yourself on fire, or, if you must, at least make sure you do it in a way that's funny, not tragic." As the sun set and the fireworks were prepared, the trunk muttered, "I swear, if I had hands, I'd be covering my eyes." The fireworks display began as a triumphant success. Bursts of golden fountains and glittering wheeling spirals filled the night sky. The crowd gasped in awe. The princess clapped her hands with delight, and the young man basked in the glory of his brilliance. But then, in the heat of the excitement, he decided that a grand finale was in order. With a flourish, he lit the largest firework he could find, a monstrous thing that made even the sky seem too small for its ambitions. Unfortunately, in his enthusiasm, he failed to notice that it had been positioned a little too close to his beloved flying trunk. With a loud whoosh, the rocket took off, dragging the trunk with it. "Oh, you absolute fool! You dolt!" the trunk bellowed as it soared into the air, spinning wildly. "I did not wish for this to be my spectacular ending!" The young man could only watch in horror as his dear trunk, his companion, his home, his means of transportation, became nothing more than a streak of flame against the sky. And then, boom! The firework exploded in a shower of color, and with it, the trunk was gone. Silence fell over the crowd. The young man, his face frozen in disbelief, barely registered the king's hand clapping down on his shoulder. "Well," the king said, "that was unexpected." The wedding was called off shortly thereafter. An angel, but without a trunk as a means of flying, was after all just an ordinary man, and an ordinary man was no match for a princess of such standing. The young man, though heartbroken, took it all with surprising grace. He wandered the streets for a time, telling stories for supper and sleeping under the stars. And yet, being young and of an optimistic nature, he was not completely lost. For though the trunk was gone, the stories remained. And so, the young man traveled from town to town, telling tales that made people laugh, cry, and wonder. In time, he became famous, not as an angel, but as a storyteller. And while he never flew again, he found that sometimes the right words could carry one just as far. The end. Thank you for listening to this bedtime story. I hope you enjoyed the tale tonight. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more audiobooks and tales to come. Until next time.